Acorn knowledge. Lionfish. Why are lionfish considered such a problem? Are lionfish really all that bad? Yes. Non-native lionfish are a terrible problem in the western Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea, and in the Gulf of Mexico. However, they are not a problem in the native ranges of the Indian Ocean, Southern and Western Pacific Ocean, and in the Red Sea. The world is still waiting to see how bad the problem with non-native lionfish in the Mediterranean is going to get. It is a relatively new invasion that is only just really beginning to develop. One thing is for certain, the lionfish invasion is probably the worst man-made ecological disaster ever witnessed, and it has yet to completely play itself out. In favorable conditions, female lionfish can release egg masses approximately every 4 days, up to 2 million eggs a year. Lionfish larvae have an incredibly high recruitment rate to suitable habitat, meaning that potentially more eggs become larvae, which then become juvenile lionfish settled somewhere that they can grow and live relatively free from environmental pressure. To put it another way, lionfish breed faster than rabbits, and most of them find good homes with plenty of food. Lionfish are sexually mature, reach 1 year of age, and can live well beyond 15 years. There are aquarium owners who have reported having a lionfish live to 20 years old. Lionfish can eat prey over half the size of their own body as long as it will fit into their mouths. Their stomach can expand up to 30 times the normal volume, and a lionfish will fill up to capacity as soon as it is able. Lionfish are not picky eaters and feed indiscriminately. Scientists have cataloged over 70 different species that lionfish will eat through stomach content analysis. In addition to the fish they eat, they also eat invertebrates and mollusks, shrimp, crabs, juvenile octopus, squid, juvenile lobster, seahorses, etc. The native species that invasive lionfish are feeding upon do not recognize lionfish as a predator and flee. In fact, just the opposite has been shown to be true. Small fish will often congregate around a lionfish, most likely believing that the lionfish's long spines, fin rays, and feathery pectoral fins offer them shelter and protection from predators. However, when the lionfish is ready to eat, these fish are herded into alcoves where they cannot escape. Lionfish use lightning-fast strikes and gulp down dozens of whole fish at a time. Science has demonstrated that a single lionfish can reduce native marine creatures by 80% to 90% in its range within just 5 weeks. Ecologically important species include the grazers and the cleaners that maintain the health of the reef and the health of other fish. Grazers eat the algae that grows over the reef. They are essentially the lawnmowers that keep the algae levels low enough that coral can get enough oxygen to survive and allow coral to spawn and space for baby coral to settle onto substrate where it can establish itself and grow. Grazers include parrotfish, goatfish, wrasses, surgeonfish, and tangs, and many others that are favorite prey of lionfish. Not only do reefs provide shelter and protection to entire schools of juvenile marine creatures, but some say that reefs and the algae that grows on them may provide as much as 80% of the Earth's oxygen. Over 42 million people in the western Atlantic basin make their living from coral reefs, mainly through fishing and tourism. One doesn't have to look farther than the Caribbean Sea to see that. The Mesoamerican reef is the second largest reef system in the world, sits squarely in the invasive lionfish's newly found habitat. If the reef smothers and dies under the additional pressures caused by lionfish, what will happen? We're not sure that anyone has an educated answer to that question, yet it seems entirely possible. Cleaners remove harmful material from native fish and marine creatures. Unlike native species of fish, a lionfish will consume the small fish and invertebrates that work in cleaning stations, where reef fish, turtles, and other marine life go to have parasites and other detritus removed, which in turn keeps them healthy. Usually the cleaners are relatively free from predation or harm while at work, crawling all over and into the mouths of potential predators. Lionfish are the exception to this rule. They will gorge themselves on cleaner shrimp, wrasse, and gobies, thereby decimating the cleaning station altogether. The loss of these cleaning stations presents the serious potential decline in the overall health of the creatures that depend upon them to stay healthy and disease-free. Commercially important species include, for sale, the fish and marine creatures delivered for human consumption and nutritional supplements and put into industrial uses such as pharmaceuticals, animal feeds, pigments, clothing, skins and pearls, fertilizers, etc. There is no doubt that as commercially important species diminish due to lionfish predation that the price of those items will go up. It's a simple exercise of supply and demand. Table fish supplies commonly served in local restaurants, like grouper, snapper, tunas, etc., will become more difficult to catch and the supplies required and prices will necessarily go up as a result. Eating habits may then shift to other proteins, forcing fishermen and entire fishing communities out of business. Traditionally important species of fish and marine creatures are those marine from which Aboriginal people and groups produced their livelihood or used them in accordance with their traditions and history. While not necessarily common in the United States, artesian fishing practices and hyperlocal fisheries-dependent pockets of people certainly exist in Central and South America. Many indigenous populations require the fisheries resources commonly found in their region to sustain their way of life or produce income in order to survive in an increasingly commercial world. As lionfish predation continues to create unprecedented pressures on these local fisheries, traditional fishing and unique cultures inexorably tied to the sea are also threatened to near extinction. Lionfish stomach contents provided by Fadilla Ali. Recreationally important species of marine life are those creatures commonly associated with sport, recreation, or for consumption by participants, and not for sale. For example, billfish, mahi-mahi, wahoo, jacks, tuna, and other game fish are specifically prized by anglers, while scuba divers really enjoy seeing things like octopus, seahorses, lobsters, crabs, and other unique marine life we find special to see on any dive. Lionfish regularly raid the nurseries where juvenile game fish usually find security while growing up, and they are eating them in unsustainable amounts. We also know that lionfish eat seahorses, juvenile octopus, and lobsters. The impacts reach much further than just the divers and fishermen, however. There are people, indeed entire economies, that depend upon these recreational activities as well. Places like the Bahamas, Caymans, Cozumel, the Bay Islands of Honduras, Utila and Roatan, Bonaire, and many others depend upon the tourism-related revenue that sport fishing and scuba diving generates. Diving alone is a $2.1 billion economy in the Caribbean. Businesses like hotels, dive centers, fishing charters, restaurants, and all of their employees in areas like these rely upon a steady flow of tourists in search of the best recreational and sport experiences available. If the reef dies and the pretty fish die, scuba divers will choose a different destination. If the sport fish stocks dry up, then sport fishermen stop coming, too. Paychecks dry up, jobs are lost, and the economies collapse of those areas unable to make the shift to other industries or sources of revenue. They have been spotted in water as little as 1 foot, 0.3 m, deep to beyond 1,000 feet, 305 meters, deep. They are equally at home in brackish water river estuaries and mangroves, where most of the juvenile fish grow up. Being able to tolerate water temperatures down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, they have established a current range from Rhode Island, United States, as far south as Brazil. They are highly tolerant to temperature change and biologically resistant to most diseases and parasites that affect native fish. When food is scarce due to temperature and climate, lionfish can live beyond 3 months without eating anything at all and lose very little body mass as a result. We are only just beginning to understand the consequences of the lionfish invasion at this point. Even the scientists that have been studying the non-native lionfish for 2 decades are having a really tough time even articulating what the landscape of our local oceans and seas are going to look like 10 short years from now. The population explosion has taken most of them completely by surprise, and they readily admit that the problem is far worse than could be imagined even 6 or 7 years ago. If there is something you would like to see, please leave a comment, and as always, thanks for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe.